Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod. I'm your host, Josh, and we have Darian returning from last week, our special guest host, who will be chatting with me all about the latest Bad Batch episode, Infested. This is episode number 13, and the Bad Batch helps Sid heist a bunch of spice from her place of business when it gets taken from her by a guy named Roland, who is in cahoots with the Pykes Syndicate. So lots of stuff to talk about in correlation with Solo, the Pykes Syndicate itself, as well as speculation on the live-action shows, what it has to do with characters in Solo, this and that. Let's get into it with Darian.
Another happy landing.
Welcome back, sir. I have one question for you. What were your thoughts on this most recent episode of Star Wars: The Bad Batch?
To be completely honest, it was a little bit of a letdown. I think it was a good episode, but maybe in the timeline of The Bad Batch, it feels weird to leave on such a high of the last few episodes to then get a storyline that feels not quite relevant. But that being said, we did get some character development within at least Omega, and it was enjoyable to watch. It just, I guess, wasn't what I was looking for. What about you?
I liked the fact that it was kind of heisty. The bugs were interesting. It was a bit of a tense moments here and there, which I thought was cool. We got a few new a few new characters introduced, which is always nice. And I'm a big sucker for a good heist movie or a good heist episode of some kind. So seeing them trying to steal something from their own place of business was pretty cool. I like that a lot.
Like, do you think anything we learned in this episode is going to be relevant to the next, I guess, 3 episodes?
Yeah, so I don't know. That's a really big question, I guess, because with so little episodes left in the first season, like, if they're pulling stops like this, maybe. But at the same time, like, we completely moved away from the whole Crosshair storyline that was set up in the last one, where he was going to try and hunt them down and everything. And I was really looking forward to that. And then we got this episode and I'm like, okay, this is just kind of a breathing moment for, I guess, maybe they're trying to savor that for the finale or something, which would, be I guess we got to wait, like, what is it? We got, how many episodes left? Is it
I think it's
more?
3, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, three more. So the next one's this Friday. It's called War Mantle. But that's like 3 more. That's like almost a month.
Right.
So like waiting a month, I'm going to get antsy, like just seeing what happens. But yeah, I don't know. It was okay. I mean, like the character that we met, which was the Davronian guy, he was interesting. What's his name again? Trying to remember what it was. But Roland.
Roland Durand. Yeah.
Roland Durand. Yeah. Roland. Such a non-Star Wars name right there. Like, you just don't expect this alien guy to be named Roland, like a criminal Davronian crime boss guy. It's like, what's his name? Roland.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the next guy we're gonna meet, his name's gonna be like Napoleon or something like that. Like,
that's
come
funny.
on. I feel like he was named after somebody on the staff or the crew or something like that.
True. Yeah.
But, I don't know. How did you like the heist part of it? Because I mean that to me was like the only enjoyable part of the whole episode.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I've always been a fan of heist related movies. I think we even saw a little bit of heist in Solo. Just kind of cool to be brought back to that within Star Wars. It was definitely like I said, it was an enjoyable episode, but I think at least me as a viewer was so focused on seeing something else that like if this episode was maybe 2 or 3 episodes into the whole season, I think you'd get a lot better feedback from the viewers and the fans. But yes, I do think that the heist aspect was very cool. And the characters were cool. The Pykes were interesting. And I'd like to hear what you think about the Pykes and maybe where else we've seen those in Star Wars, because I believe this is not the first time.
Right. So the Pykes, that kind of leads into them. Like, I think the bigger thing I want to bring up here, which is my theory as far as what might be going on here. The Pykes have showed up numerous amount of times in various forms of Star Wars media. The most notable ones being Clone Wars and now Bad Batch, and various comics and books and stuff like that. But the Pike crime syndicate's always been one of those big name crime syndicates, like in the Star Wars galaxy. And they had very intimate relations with Darth Maul and the Shadow Collective in the earlier Clone Wars seasons when Darth Maul is trying to take his revenge, and he makes the Shadow Collective, tries to take Mandalore and succeeds, but then the crime syndicate kind of falls apart, and the Pykes more or less kind of go their own way. And we know that they've also been involved with the assassination of Cypher Dyas, which is also a pretty big topic. So they've been a big name thing. One of the more curious things about the Pykes being involved now is it just kind of like sparked my interest in what's happening with the Crimson Dawn, which is most notably the antagonist crime syndicate in Solo, a Star Wars story, which is what you were just brought up with the comparison to Solo. And when it comes to the Crimson Dawn, I think it's very much like a sequelized, a follow-up crime syndicate, which kind of came from the ashes of the Shadow Collective, which is what Maul tried to bring all these crime syndicates together. And it kind of is the remnants of that relationship. And Crimson Dawn and Solo is very much at its peak, and they're clearly at a height, Darth Maul sitting on a throne wearing a gold chain around his neck and everything like that. He's clearly finally got it made at this point. In the Clone Wars Season 7 finale, we saw the Pykes were involved with Maul at that time, before he was captured and before the whole Mandalore thing. They even showed up in, I think, the hologram along with Dryden Voss in like a cameo appearance in one of the last episodes, like in the opening sequence. Right. So seeing the Pykes here in this show, I'm starting to think, like, what's the likelihood that we're actually going to be getting some characters and some story threads to kind of weave into Solo, which is only like 4 years worth of events away from the point of this series, right? Yeah. What do you think is the likelihood of that? I don't know. And who do you wish to see if that
Well, I
is
think that may be, like you said, that may be the reason that we even had this episode in the first place, is it setting it up. I think Solo for me, when I first watched it, I almost had to watch Solo a couple times, to be honest, to like fully understand it and get all the juice out of it, we'll say. Yeah. Because it was packed with so many things we haven't seen before within Star Wars, or at least I hadn't. I've always been someone that's watched the main films, I guess, and read some other stuff. I didn't read all the comics and all the books, so I never had the full picture. So maybe that's why Solo is a little more confusing for me. But I hope so. I hope we get to see more backstory on Crimson Dawn and other aspects of Solo as well. Yeah,
for sure. Solo's one of those interesting ones where they just kind of dove in there and did what they did, and there really wasn't a whole lot of tie-in stuff. Like, I mean, it wasn't supposed to feed off of the prequels directly, but we knew that it took place kind of 5 years after, and it didn't necessarily need to feed into any movie because it was so far from the events of Rogue One and A New Hope, right? So it was very much like that what Lucasfilm kind of targeted at being, which was an anthology film, right?
Yeah.
Which fits into the saga, but kind of just exists on its own in a way.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I very much appreciated out of that movie, and I usually bring this up, but I was just blown away at the end when they had Darth Maul like sitting there, Ray Park doing the onset, and then Sam Witwer doing the voiceovers and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just amazing, like fantastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to think that they finally took that big step in kind of embracing the canonicity of the animated shows and tying that into the live action films, right? And I was like, this is what Star Wars needs. Like, this is what it really needs to kind of bring that story together and weld those seams, because it's very obvious at times that the animated shows, as much as they are Star Wars and within the canon, a lot of people look at them as if they're a separate entity, right? Like, not part of the story,
For sure.
But there's so much in these shows, right? And a lot of it starts with these episodes that set up certain characters for later or whatever, and you never know, right? And so it could be down the line, like maybe this Roland character might be a very, very crucial person in the story, and might have a lot more to do later. So I guess we'll have to find out.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up that whole Darth Maul scene, because the first time I watched Solo, I actually didn't watch it in theaters. I forget why, but I was quite sick, like really sick, watching Solo. And I think I even like fell asleep, not because it was boring, but just because I was sick. So I didn't see the Darth Maul scene. And then later, people were like, "Did you like wasn't it cool seeing Darth Maul?" I'm like, "He was in the movie." So I had to like rewatch it, and I'm like, "Okay, wow, this is cool." And seeing Darth Maul actually made me want to watch Clone Wars, because I kind of thought Darth Maul was like gone. Like, oh, that's probably all we'll see of Darth Maul within Star Wars. But then seeing him in Solo is like, wait, like we see him in other things. And then I looked more into it. I'm like, okay, he's in Clone Wars. And that made me want to watch Clone Wars. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So in a way, it's almost like, so would you say ultimately appearances like that in live action movies bring fans in to watch these animated shows, or would you say more so it turns fans away from stuff overall?
No, I think 100%, and it makes it all feel connected, right? Like us seeing Darth Maul in Clone Wars is cool, because basically in episode 1 of Star Wars, we only get a taste of Darth Maul. We see he's an awesome fighter, obviously very talented, but that's about it. So the Clone Wars gives it a full picture, and we get way more depth than Darth Maul and who he is. And I listened to that episode that you created, the What Happened, that was helpful too. But Darth Maul is just such a complex character that like we see like a full arc almost. And if you just watched episode 1 and even Solo, like you wouldn't even get the full picture. So I was definitely happy that Solo had that scene to make me want to watch Clone Wars. Cause like you mentioned before, growing up, I thought Clone Wars was more of a show for kids, and same with stuff like Rebels and stuff, where actually it's very relevant and almost necessary to watch it if you're a Star Wars fan. That's the way I see it. So
no, that's well said. Yeah, perfectly. I mean, I've usually recommended Clone Wars to anyone of all ages, and Rebels is great, and so far this show is turning out to be fantastic as well, but I mean, Clone Wars is just, it's so crucial, like to just all the movies, right? And before we got The Rise of Skywalker, there was this script from Colin Trevorrow, which I think we brought it up last time. Yeah. And in this script, it would have referenced a lot of stuff that happened in Clone Wars, like with the Mortis arc and this very contrasted, very literal fight between light and darkness and everything like that. And this final battle would have taken place on this planet. And I think to myself, like, man, like anyone who saw that movie, or if it existed, would have been, going right home and watching that Clone Wars arc, right? Similar to how you look up, what happened with Darth Maul, like after you see Solo, and it's like, what am I missing here? There's a missing chapter in these movies, and that the answer is in the animated shows. And, it's almost like in Mandalorian as well. Now paying respects to Luke Skywalker. I don't know if you've seen these headlines lately, but Lucasfilm recently hired the YouTuber who did the artistry of deep faking Mark Hamill's face onto the CG Luke face that they had in that last episode.
Right.
So there's a lot of people thinking like, oh, we're going to see Luke Skywalker again. Right. And I mean, they kind of set it up that way anyways, but it's like, okay, I mean, we're getting Luke Skywalker in this live action show.
Right.
It's like, even though it's not a staple movie, it's Luke Skywalker, right? Like, I mean, that's a chapter alone right there in the story of the Skywalker family that is almost not meant to be understated, kind of thing. So
do you think, not to go too off path here, but The Mandalorian, obviously, like, I'm sure they make it as they go somewhat, at least season by season. So do you think with the positive reaction of Luke Skywalker, that's when they maybe decided, hey, we should bring him back? Or do you think it was always a plan to have Luke in the Mandalorian series?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know. I think the expense of having a character like that is very big in a show of a high budget the way it is. But it's possible that because in the story, it doesn't feel weird as if we would see him again, right? Like they definitely set it up to make it seem like we would. However, it also wouldn't be surprising if maybe we didn't, just based on, I don't know.
True.
The fact that we just might not, right? And they only wrote the third season, I guess, after they finished the second one, and
right,
and there was quite a long time of pre-production and all that. So yeah, I mean, I would imagine that they had it in mind, and of course, I'm sure they know that fans would love to see him again. I think they're probably looking forward to what the reaction would be, because I'm sure that was a very tough secret to keep when they were working on that show, and Luke Skywalker being back and everything. But yeah, I mean, it's the thing about any of these shows, like live action, animated, whatever. They're just so great to even just once, just to see it all the way through, because it's like there's some little stories here and there that just have such a big impact on what comes next, right? And for me, at least, the story of going from Luke Skywalker, Return of the Jedi, to Luke Skywalker, The Force Awakens, there's a chapter that's missing there, clearly. And we get the flashbacks, we get the tales from Kylo Ren and this and that, and it's like, okay, they're recounting the journey, but like as a viewer, we haven't seen that journey happen. We don't make that mental connection between the Luke Skywalker that we know and love and the Luke Skywalker that we all hate, right? And like, I think there's an important kind of lesson there to be accounted for these creatives that are making these stories, that telling the complete story arc is, at the end of the day, very important. And these shows can be a true testament to the story segue, that they can use these as like a vessel to give us those stories, right? Mandalorian is a perfect example. Never expected that character to show up, and yet it was awesome. Like the best I've ever. It's everything I wanted and didn't know I wanted it.
Yeah.
Right.
True. Yeah. There's like nothing negative about that scene or bringing in Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
But exactly. You're right. How they could end it. Just like, I think Ahsoka too. Like, we could not see her again in The Mandalorian and be satisfied, I guess. Like, they didn't.
Right.
They didn't leave us hanging on for more. Like, hopefully we see her again, because like, she's a great character. But if we don't, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. I definitely enjoyed that. And I still remember that scene when you see his X-Wing or whatever, like flying past the window. You're like, who is it?
I know who it is. Yeah. Speaking of Ahsoka, though, I mean, we are getting a live action Ahsoka show at some point, in a year or so from now. And, Clone Wars season 7 very much was, Clone Wars in general is very much her show. the story of her being apprenticed to the Chosen One and learning under the best of, the Jedi before everything kind of hits the fan. And, we've seen her journey through Rebels as well, and made the connection from that to Mandalorian. And now she'll be getting her own show that follows her appearance in that show. And it's going to be I think it's going to be a 1-season show. But what I'm curious about, because this is just something that's been floating around that I'd like to kind of throw out there as far as a question for you. There's rumors that Bariss Offee could be returning in live action for the Ahsoka show, based on casting rumors, based on just rumors in general. Take it with a grain of salt, but it sparked my interest when I read it, and I was like, she's not confirmed to be dead. At the same time, we have no stories of her between Clone Wars and anything else. She's definitely a possible character that could return in some way or form. They would have to come up with a pretty good explanation for what that reason would be. But,
right.
I'm just curious, like what your thoughts are. Like, do you think we're going to get some flashbacks or something? And, could we see this character return in Bad Batch that might set things up for that show? And I don't know, just like, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, we could see her. I've been more looking forward to Thrawn, right? Because when last time we saw her in Mandalorian, she was looking for Thrawn, wasn't it?
Ahsoka, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I guess I would ask you is, do you think we'll see Thrawn? Bariss Offee, I haven't seen any of these headlines or any of the rumors.
Yeah, you remember her character, right?
Yes.
She was the Jedi. She was Ahsoka's friend who kind of framed her for the bombing at the Jedi Temple.
Yes.
And so it was that whole story, and she just disappears after that. So it's very likely she could have just been executed, and that was that.
Yeah, I remember her. Yeah.
And at the same time, we've not seen her in any kind of canon story since. And as far as to my knowledge, if anyone has read something more recent that does hint at her existence still being alive and all that at the time of the original trilogy, then send us a tweet at SW Escape Podcast. But
is she also in season 2 of Clone Wars, in one of the arcs where it's Anakin and I believe Bariss Offee or Offee, and then it's Ahsoka and her Padawan, and they get stuck? Is that her?
Yeah, so it's Illuminara and Anakin, which are the masters, and then the apprentices get stuck in the when they blow up the droid factory, which is Ahsoka and Bariss. Yeah, so that's when they first meet. That's when they kind of make friends,
right?
And then down the road they have another interaction with the Geonosian zombie egg worms. Yeah, it was like that the Brain Invaders episode. And then I think that was the last, or maybe one of the last 2 episodes that she was in before the finale. That in my head, I'm still thinking of it as the finale, but it was the end of season 5 when Ahsoka gets framed, and that was right before the show got canceled, before season 6, when they dumped it on Netflix for the remaining 12 that they did or whatever it was. Right. But yeah, like Bariss really, I kind of wish that she had a little more screen time, because that was such a harsh transition, and it didn't feel unnatural or anything, but it was a shocker, and I absolutely loved that story arc. And I would be so down to see this character again. And even if it is in a flashback, we know that the live action shows have not been too stranger to flashbacks, we've seen Din Djarin's origins of being taken by the Death Watch, and we've seen that in the Clone Wars, with the super battle droids walking around and blowing up stuff and killing his parents and everything. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw maybe some sort of Ahsoka's memories coming back. And we know they got Hayden on set for the Kenobi show. Maybe he's going to do some crossover film work with the Ahsoka show and do some live action work there. That would be amazing. Have you seen the movie Shattered Glass?
No.
So Hayden Christensen and Rosario Dawson have worked together before on that movie years ago, and I watched it just because of that. And he's a very undesirable character in the movie. He plays this journalist who just lies about all his stories, and he gets caught. It's based on a true story, and Rosario Dawson's character plays she plays somebody in the company that he works at, the journalist newspaper company that he works for, and she's one of the people on that staff, and one of the people that starts to kind of clue in, I guess, to what's going on. But yeah, it was cool to see them kind of work together, and then now it's like they're playing master and apprentice kind of things. Like, I don't know, it would be such a cool thing to see them on screen together as the characters.
What's the timeline? Where is this show being fit into the Star Wars timeline again?
Ahsoka, I believe Ahsoka is going to take place after Mandalorian season 2. So it pretty much follows her one episode that she shows up for, and so continues that story.
Seeing Thrawn, then maybe in live action might be likely.
Yeah, I would imagine that comes at the very end. Yeah, and it's tough to say whether or not it'll overlap with Mando season 3, or if it'll maybe exist afterwards or something like that. But they have come out and said that Book of Boba Fett will be Mandalorian season 2.5. That's basically what it's being set up for.
If I had to guess, I would guess the Ahsoka show would go alongside it as well, just because of what Kathleen Kennedy teased of like all these shows coming together, kind of like an Avengers kind of thing. So it would kind of have to be around the same time, or at least near it. Yeah, I guess right after.
Yeah, definitely.
But, yeah, maybe even Thrawn would be like, I don't know, the Ultron of like the Star Wars universe. Like all these characters come together or something. And who knows what that'll look like? Like, will it be a theatrical release or?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm wondering, because they have released information that there's going to be 2 live action Star Wars films going forward. Rogue Squadron is going to be directed by Patty Jenkins, who is last known for doing Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 1984. So a desirable director right now to have, I guess, and they want her to do this film about Rogue Squadron, which it takes the name from the games and the books and all that. And I don't know when that takes place. It's possible it could be in this rough era, or maybe even during the original trilogy kind of time. But anyone who's into X-Wing pilots and, you know, starship battles and everything, like, this movie is pretty much being designed for those kind of fans. And
that could be really cool.
Yeah. And her father, I believe she revealed, was in the, you know, the army for flying planes. I forget the name of that division.
The Air Force?
Yes, the Air Force. Thank you. Mind blank. But yeah, so I guess she has a personal connection to doing this kind of style of a movie, which is really cool. So I've been looking forward to that. The other one is by Taika Waititi, and very, very hot director right now. Yeah, busy guy. And so they haven't really talked about anything as to what he's doing, but I can imagine it being something with a bit of a quirkiness to it. So of course, I don't imagine it to be the most serious movie of all things, because Taika Waititi, right? Yeah. But I don't know. Maybe we'll at some point get information. I mean, we know Celebration takes place next year. That's the next one, is in Anaheim. It's possible that at Anaheim they'll not only release information about the movie or the show that will culminate these things together. I would imagine that it would be next year, because that will be after Book of Boba Fett is all released, which comes out this fall. So lots to look forward to there. Sure. All right. So I don't know if you knew this, but Kira from Solo has more recently made a return in the Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters comic book lineup. They haven't necessarily completely abandoned the Solo storyline, right? But, you know, to kind of loop Bad Batch back into this, like, it would not surprise me if they started to set things up in the Bad Batch for maybe characters in that movie, and now they're continuing that story in the form of other types of multimedia. So, yeah, Lucasfilm, you never know. It's like
True.
Sky's the limit kind of thing.
Yeah, who knows, right? Like all these filler episodes we think are a little boring. Like there's probably a bigger meaning in like why they're placed where they are and why we're getting these characters. So I think you're totally right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the only thing, like I said before, like the only solid thing that I got from this episode was Omega's character development and how even with this guy that Roland,
yeah.
right? She even had so much compassion for him, even with what he did to them. So
yeah, she did.
I just like that just shows like who she is like as a person, and even like when they didn't know who Sid was at the beginning, the Bad Batch is ready to peace, and she's like, no, like we have to find Sid, even though Sid's really only made them do stuff for money. Like she hasn't really been super nice to them, I guess, other than her and Omega when they played like the chess game and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you think Sid could be part of the main crew going forward, like as part of the ship, part of the crew?
She could be. Something like that, I think, would maybe depend on the audience's or the viewer's reaction. Like if she's being liked as a character, maybe they'd continue with her, which I don't mind. I don't mind her as a character. Like she's not my favorite, but
yeah, I think she's got this biker chick kind of tough grandma feel about her, so she adds something interesting to the cast of this show, and it's very plausible. I think that she could add in this unique flavor that this crew might need in season 2, right? So she could become more of a permanent addition and actually like fly around with them and everything. And like Jedi Fallen Order has their pilot of their ship and everything, and he's like this little toad guy, like an alien species. So it could be, and Han Solo's got Chewbacca, and all these like crews tend to have an alien cast member. The Rebels crew had Zeb. It's just a fundamental thing, it seems. And the other thing is they've been doing so much to build her relationship with Omega as well, that she really is kind of part of Omega's makeshift family, who she really just has no family. And that's one thing that has stuck out to me as well. And time and time again, Omega has just been kind of growing as a person and really starting to, for someone who's never really been out in the universe and been out in the galaxy and stuff, she's really grasping that mentality of helping people, right? And being that very obvious protagonist of the story.
Yeah, and just who knows if Omega's, I don't know, compassion will be relevant to these next couple episodes. Do you think, is there any reason that maybe the fact that there's like Bad Batch being geared towards a younger audience than, let's say, the normal movies, that's why they didn't just kill Roland, for example? Like, do you think there's a reason they spared Roland, and will we see him again, do you think?
Yeah, so like the Pike leader responds that they do not accept bad deals, right? So like they choose not to kill him and cut off his horn instead. So like I don't know. I think like if they were to cross paths with the Pikes again and Roland is involved, he's probably a dead man. So like I imagine they don't want to do business with Roland anymore. So this also kind of makes me wonder whether or not we even will see the Pikes again. But it's definitely one of those episodes that I hope they're trying to set something up, because otherwise it's just this weird one shot that was like, okay, well that just happened, and doesn't really go anywhere. So I hope this becomes a bit of an arc, and if anything big is to happen in the remaining episodes of the show, the next one is called War Mantle. I have absolutely no idea what that's supposed to refer to, and we don't know what the last 2 episodes are called. But with only 3 episodes left, I'm extremely curious as to like why they wanted to set this character up when they did, Roland.
Yeah.
When they did an episode like this in Rebels, he was a shady weapons dealer by the name of my goodness, I'm blanking on his name too. And I believe he was also a Devronian character. And he pops up once, and then he's just kind of their go-to guy for like sketchy jobs and stuff. And it just didn't really, I don't know, to me it just didn't feel like it ever went anywhere important. It was just kind of like a hook for them to go back to for these various things.
Right.
And so maybe Roland is going to be a guy like that, and it's just this entire episode is just going to be a bit of a set up for those episodes later kind of thing. I don't know, trying to make the show interesting, I guess. But,
or maybe we'll see him in season 2 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely the show is at its weakest points when it does one shots. Like they benefit so much greater from doing story arcs, The last arc is evidence enough that, seeing 2 episodes about Ryloth, fantastic. He was awesome, right?
Yeah.
So
who knows if even the final 2 episodes would be like a 2-parter or even an arc in itself. I would hope so. So we end on a good note, and like we get lots of, as we talked about last week, when there's an arc, like 2-episode arc even, there's just so much more depth, and we can just get a lot more answers. So hopefully that'll be the case moving forward, and hopefully like the next 3 episodes we will be seeing Crosshair, and that will get resolved rather than being pushed to next season. Yeah,
I certainly hope so. Yeah, and if it does get, like, here's the thing, like this show has run so far into just setting up stuff and not resolving a whole lot of things. I'm convinced season 2 is going to be a thing. Like this is just the next animated series that Lucasfilm is just going to be working on for a while, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of sold on that at this point. I don't think we're going to get a different show later about other characters in a different time and stuff like that. I can imagine the show going for at least 3 seasons, like, solidly.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, Disney Plus as a whole has been so successful that the money they have to spend, and it's like, I would think an animated show like The Bad Batch is a lot cheaper to produce than something like The Mandalorian.
Yeah, definitely.
I would think so. So that being, and like they've already invested the money into creating the season, which has been great. So why not spend a little bit more and continue it rather than, like you said, just let's looking into some more characters. So I hope you're right. I've enjoyed it and I want to see more.
Mm-hmm. If there was an animated show that didn't take place in this time period, where would you pinpoint it to be, and what would it be about?
That's a good question. Maybe like before episode 1, or maybe even but before episode 1 would be cool. Or even, I don't know, where do you think you'd like to see? Like where's an area that we haven't seen? I've heard you talk about on the show, like the High Republic and that kind of thing.
So we're actually getting a live action show called The Acolyte, which takes place about 50 years before Phantom Menace. I think it's about 50 years before Phantom Menace. Yeah. And it's technically at the very tail end of what they consider the High Republic era. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what that time period looks like. But additionally to that, whether or not we'll have any shows that follow the events of that show, and even more so, like whether or not they'll be based, like other forms of media based around that show that kind of ties into it, other than High Republic stuff.
Yeah. I guess it would be nice for me personally. Like I really liked Qui-Gon, and I feel like it's sad we only got to see him for 1 episode. Yeah. Like it would be cool to see like more of his origins.
Like an
maybe
origin story
even
for Liam.
like the beginning. Like we haven't really seen Sypha Dyas. I think he was in like a flashback in Clone Wars or something.
He was just talked about. Yeah. We never saw him as a he was portrayed as like a ghost by the Sith on Malachor. He was portrayed like Palpatine as a lie to Yoda when he's like deceiving him and stuff. And we have had an audiobook drama called Dooku Jedi Lost, which gets into an origin story for Sifo-Dyas in that. Dooku Jedi Lost. Yeah, it gets into the origin story for him in that story, which is pretty cool. And as a young Jedi, he kind of suffers from insane visions of the future, and it's like a curse kind of thing. Like it plagues him. So his obsession to do something about this nightmare that he has about saving the Jedi from imminent destruction and everything is kind of this lingering thought in his head that he can't escape, which kind of leads him to go down that path of creating an army behind the Jedi's back because they don't believe him. They think he's nuts. Right. And then Dooku using that as leverage to then kill him, and no one knows anything about it anyways, right? It's all Palpatine's plan, so all three of them are in cahoots with each other for a little bit, but I don't think Sifo-Dyas knows that Dooku is a Sith, but
right. So don't you think that would be cool to see in animated form?
It would be super cool. Yeah.
Even like seeing Dooku before he was.
Yeah. Like getting something in there. Yeah. Anything like that would be awesome. For me, I would actually really love to see an animated show that predates the sequels, like midway through, kind of between the two trilogies, tries to really get into the nitty gritty of like, here's how Palpatine actually survived and like all that stuff, right? Like the comics are kind of doing their best, and the live action shows are also, we're heading in that direction. I think, I don't know what the heck was in those test tubes, but I imagine them to be Snoke's. And they've been hinting at that, so there's a little bit of development there, but like that's a great spot to put in an animated show about maybe Luke getting the Jedi started again, the Jedi Order started again. It'd be an awesome opportunity to have him. Mark Hamill could voice himself, like he's no stranger to voice work. Right. He did the Joker for many years on Batman, and, he's a very talented voice guy. So like, I'm pretty sure he'd be down. Hayden Christensen and still kicking around in Star Wars, as well as Matt Lanter doing voice of Anakin Skywalker on Clone Wars. So, I mean, we could have that father-son interaction that we never had, that the sequels completely missed opportunity. I was so hoping to see that when episode 7 was announced, and we just never got it. And it's something to this day that I've always wanted to see is some dialogue between Force Ghost Anakin and Luke Skywalker learning how to be a Jedi, right? That's just something I've always wanted to see, is the father-son thing that they never had, and it was just too late, and then he died, right? And to me, it just feels like an incomplete, kind of unresolved thing that just needs to happen. And whether it takes place in animation or not, like there's not even a book that really talks about that stuff. So it would be great to have that in some sort of form.
For sure.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Is there anything last minute you want to kind of bring up?
No, I think, I'm just really looking forward to seeing where this goes. I think it's a great show, so I hope they continue it and don't leave us hanging. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. Thanks for coming back, and we're definitely going to have you back at some point in the future.
Cool. Sounds good.
Sweet. Thank you so much to Darian for coming back the last 2 weeks and co-hosting. We'll be getting Darian back on again at some point in the future, hopefully with a bigger party, and perhaps Blake can join us for that one as well. He's been away the last 2 weeks. It's just been busy times for everybody, and it's always great to keep doing this show regardless. It's a hobby of ours, but honestly, we love to see people tuning into the show. So best way to help us out is to send the show to a fellow Star Wars fan, a friend, and by dropping a 5-star review. If you couldn't leave us 5-star review, I would love to know, and you can send your comments and feedback into the email, and and Twitter and Instagram listed in the description box below. There's also a link to our voicemail. So please, if you leave a voicemail, we might even play it on the show and actually have a few things to respond to personally. So if you have any thoughts, question of the week, if you have any thoughts on this latest Star Wars The Bad Batch episode, send it in. We would love to hear your voice on the show. We got lots of stuff coming up on the podcast, including What Happened sub-series. We'll be making a return as soon as Bad Batch is over, as well as reviews for the High Republic, the books that have dropped in from Wave 2, as well as, of course, Star Wars Visions being around the corner. We're going to be chatting all about that. We've got plans for later this year with the Book of Boba Fett. There's always so much Star Wars stuff to talk about. It's worth running a podcast for. So lots of stuff to look forward to for you guys. May the Force be with you all, and we'll see you next time on Star Wars Escape Pod.